Hi, everyone, and welcome to Navigating Your Transition from Forum to JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services. This webinar is for institutions currently licensing Forum. We will be talking about your institution's upcoming transition to the new Digital Stewardship Services platform and all you need to know about the platform's changes and new features. As you already know, JSTOR, a digital library, is part of Ithaca, a not-for-profit organization with a mission to help improve access to knowledge and education worldwide. JSTOR includes ArtStore and other resources and platforms at Ithaca, including JSTOR Stewardship Services, Portico Deep Storage Services, and Ithaca SNR, which is our research partner to institutions of learning. My name is Elizabeth Behrens, and I am a partner and user education lead at Ithaca. I am joined today by several colleagues from Ithaca. Roger Schoenfeld, the Managing Director of JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services, Jason Przyzylbilski, Associate Director of Stewardship Outreach, Ann Connolly, Senior Product Manager for Stewardship, and Dina Howard, Senior Partner and User Education Manager. First, I would like to note a few points regarding the webinar today. After you exit the webinar, you will be taken to a brief survey, and we'd appreciate hearing your thoughts about how this was helpful for you and your ideas about what additional information would be useful to learn. If you don't have time to take the survey immediately, it will also be sent to you by email in about an hour. We read every response closely and appreciate the time you take to give us your feedback, which helps shape our future webinars. We are recording this webinar, and within a few days, you will receive an email from us with a link to the webinar recording, along with an FAQ document if needed from the Q&A. Here is our agenda. Roger will be introducing JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services, and then Jason will give us an update on the transition timeline. I will take us into the live stewardship platform for a preview of the new homepage and menus. Then I will highlight some updated features and talk about the new stewardship features soon to be available to everyone. I will also tell you about educational resources that are available to you, including ongoing training. We will have about 15 minutes at the end for a Q&A where we will be joined by Ann and Dana. Now I'm going to pass the slides off to Roger.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I'm Roger Schoenfeld. It's such an honor to be joining you today. Before we get into an overview of JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services, I thought I'd just take a moment to briefly introduce myself. I've had the pleasure of getting to know many of you from past research or other kinds of collaborations, but I've recently stepped into the role of Managing Director for JSTOR Stewardship. In my time at Ithaca SNR, I've spent more than 20 years focused on how libraries and cultural organizations and publishers work together to build and steward collections in a digital environment. And so it's just such an honor to now help guide this next chapter for our organization in building and launching JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services. It's a chapter that builds directly on the foundations of ArtStore and JSTOR Forum, and continues to be shaped by the feedback and participation that you and many of your colleagues are offering us. I'll be working with a variety of teams internal to our organization, but also equally with many of you to help guide where JSTOR stewardship goes next. And that includes a strong focus on making sure that foundational functionality, including for digital asset management, reflects the expectations and needs of our participant community. So I thought that I would move on from here into the next slide to go through just a little bit of an overview of the community-built foundation on which we are building today. Our work here really starts with ArtStore, which, as I'm sure many of you, most of you know, as a vital resource for visual resources and materials. When ArtStore recognized that that not all of the collections, all of the image collections through ArtStore's digital library that there were needs for other kinds of collections beyond those, ArtStore created a service called Shared Shelf, which enabled its participants to manage and share their own institutional collections through ArtStore, through the ArtStore platform. And when ArtStore was integrated onto JSTOR, shared shelf became what you all know as JSTOR Forum. We enabled it to support more formats, and also made it possible to publish onto JSTOR directly from JSTOR Forum. So this infrastructure is the foundation on which we're building on now. And I just want to really take a moment to kind of really deeply honor the legacy here and the work that's really grounded originally in the visual resources environment. And this sets the stage now for what comes next. So let's now on the next slide look over some of that. So today we want to introduce JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services. This is an integrated set of offerings. It's a platform and a set of tools built on that foundation that we were just talking about, and it's designed for all of the distinctive collections that a library or archive stewards. And for us, this represents a real reinvestment in the distinctive collections community and the digital collections that libraries and archives hold. This is a next generation digital collections platform and environment. It's one we've developed really, really closely, working with hundreds of librarians and archivists all across the community, and really designed collaboratively in that respect. As I mentioned, we intend to support a really diverse array of distinctive collections. So that includes archival materials, it includes visual resources, it includes audio and video collections, and more. And our hope, our plan, our vision is that all of these materials can be used and accessed in a way that's truly seamless with one another. And then finally, we see this as working across the full life cycle of stewardship. We have what we believe to be a really powerful end-to-end solution here, but it's also one where you can choose which elements of it you might wish to use. So I'll say a little bit more about that in just a moment. So onto the next slide. I want to walk through the 4 foundational elements of what's in JSTOR stewardship. I'll start on the lower left with digital asset management. These are the flexible cataloging systems and the underlying platform in which you can work with a variety, your entire catalog of digital assets. Moving on to the upper left, we have what we see as being unparalleled discovery and impact. What we mean by that is we're using the JSTOR platform as the vehicle through which you can provide access to your collections broadly, and having the opportunity to use what at many institutions is the most used platform for the humanities and social sciences to really drive discovery and impact in a substantial, transformative way. Moving on to the upper right, there is long-term preservation that we're now adding into JSTOR stewardship. It's built in with using the Portico preservation technology and infrastructure. This is something that's new for forum participants. It's not part of forum, and it will become part of what is available to you as we transition into JSTOR stewardship. And then finally, we have AI-assisted collections processing. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but we have the opportunity to bring to use a new tool that our teams have built that we call JSTOR SeqLite, which makes it possible to process collections with enormous speed. So there's an opportunity, for example, to help resolve or address parts of a backlog by using JSTOR SeqLite to process archival and other collections. In terms of generating metadata, PII flagging, and similar kinds of collections processing techniques that we believe can, with the right kind of human oversight that we've crafted in JSTOR stewardship, has the possibility of really transforming the way that collections can be processed and made widely available. And that's available as part of what we call our Tier 3 offering. So that's just a little overview of what we're up to with JSTOR Stewardship. All four of these are seamlessly integrated in a single platform from the perspective of the librarian or archivist. And we see an opportunity for institutions to access all of these features on a single digital collections platform. So we're really excited to share more. And with that, let me turn things over to my colleague Jason.
Thank you so much, Roger. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I am Jason Przybilski, and it's an honor to be talking with you today. So I'm going to take a moment to talk a little bit about the upcoming transition, the timeline, and the details behind that before handing it over to Elizabeth to take forward the demo, which I'm sure is what most of you are here for, what most of you want to see. So just a couple minutes before we hand it over to Elizabeth and proceed with the demo. So I'm going to review some information we've shared with you in our previous communications about the upcoming transition from JSTOR Forum to JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services, and then provide some new updates about that transition as well. We're really excited here about this new updated platform. This is going to enable us to, moving forward, more easily support advancements over time, be more responsive to your needs in the community, and be more adaptive as we as we continue to build out these services going forward. And so we're super excited about what we're building here, and we think we certainly hope that you're going to see the benefits of that too after we make this transition. So as Roger was saying, forum participants are going to be transitioned to Tier 2 of the new JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services platform. I want to make very clear here that this is not a migration. All of your projects and everything you've set up previously will be available in the new stewardship interface. So there is no kind of additional work, no migration work that you're required to do as part of this. Essentially, once the transition is made, all you're going to need to do is start using the new stewardship URL and then get familiar with the new interface, which is of course what we're here to kind of start helping with today. And also that original forum URL is going to redirect to the new stewardship URL, so you don't even have to make that change initially. So we're trying to make this as easy and seamless as possible. The new stewardship platform includes all of that existing functionality that with Forum today, including support for creating new projects, managing those existing projects, and sharing those projects for access through the JSTOR platform or through other publishing targets. In addition, for those of you who don't already have these services, Stewardship will also add support for audio and video materials, including the auto generation of transcripts for those materials, and the option, as Roger was discussing, to preserve your projects for the long term in Portico. And Elizabeth is going to demonstrate these features in more detail during her demo, so I won't say more about that now. In terms of the timeline, we are currently completing the work in the stewardship platform that is necessary to ensure that all of your existing forum functions and workflows are supported. As part of this work, we've been collaborating with a group of about 20 forum participants who have early access to test out the stewardship platform, and we've been getting feedback from them, and they've been telling us what's working, what still needs work, and so we're doing this development closely with that group of institutions and based on their feedback. The exact timing of the transition is going to be informed by this work that we're doing on the product and the feedback that we get from those testers. So in other words, rather than being driven by some specific arbitrary date on the calendar for the transition, we're going to be guided by the work itself, and we're not going to make this transition until we know that the stewardship platform supports the functionality and the workflows that it needs to in order to support your work. That being said, while we aren't setting an exact date yet for the transition, we are following a couple kind of important guideposts in determining that transition date. As we've shared previously, we have committed to providing clear advance notice ahead of the transition, And we've also committed to not making the transition during peak academic periods. So you'll have time, you'll have notice before the transition happens, and we're not going to do that in the midst of a semester. So with all of that said, given the work that we're doing now and the commitments to the timing of the transition, we can say now that the transition will not happen before the fall 2025 semester. And then as we go forward, we'll of course continue to communicate with you as the work continues, and we're able to share more details around the exact transition date. We also know that any kind of talk about a transition or a change in the service, of course, raises questions about both current and future fees for the service. So I'd just like to take a moment to reiterate what we've said in our previous communications. As part of this transition, your fees will remain stable through the end of 2026, even after access to the new stewardship platform is enabled. Beyond 2026, we're going to take the approach that we've taken historically with Shared Shelf and Forum and across our products and services at JSTOR. We'll work with you and the broader community to develop fees that are both sustainable and that enable us to continue to do this work to invest in and improve the services over the long term. And that's really, that's the approach that has guided us, throughout our history at JSTOR, and we'll continue to do that going forward. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth to do the exciting part and show you all the new platform that we're working on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jason and Roger. Now we're going to take a look at some of the updated features in stewardship. And as you will see, many of the workflows you are already familiar with from Forum will remain largely the same. However, there are some changes to navigation and other functionality. We're making these changes to both the interface and the underlying technology in order to modernize the user experience while making the platform more accessible. We have an ongoing goal to meet accessibility standards while improving performance overall. This means there have been some changes to the locations of buttons and menus, which are not only more accessible, but also more intuitive for users to find. We are going to leave these slides and go to the live stewardship site to take a look. And I'm going to turn off my camera so you can see my screen larger as well. Okay. So here I am logged into the into the JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services site. And before I get started, I wanted to remind you that the stewardship platform is under active development as we work to get it ready for all of you to use it. As I'm demonstrating its functionality, we may encounter some display issues, and everything you see here today also might not look exactly how it will once the platform is officially released to you. But I hope you understand that's the nature of looking at a product under development. So I am on the new stewardship homepage. Once you have access to stewardship, you will use your existing username and password that you currently use in Forum. This homepage looks a little different from Forum because, as you may recall, when you log into Forum, you are taken to a page of all of your projects without a clear menu for taking action. Here in Stewardship, you can see your most recently used projects here for quick access. There are also 3 boxes under Getting Started to quickly create a new project, manage your existing projects, and import metadata using the Guided Collection Builder tool. Also new here on the left is a sidebar menu, which is persistent throughout stewardship, so you can quickly get to the tools you need. The sidebar can also be collapsed and expanded to give you some more screen space. I'll open it back up. And here is where you can find all of the tools that are currently found in the Forum top navigation bar. I'll go through these menu options now so you can become familiar with how to get to all of your usual actions. So first we have projects. Under the projects subheading, you see a link for view projects. So if I click that, I can get to all of the projects in stewardship that I have access to. The next subheading is called admin. This contains administrative functions like user management. If I click Manage Users, I can access the list of all users at my institution. So this is where you can go to add new institutional users, add them to projects, and edit their permissions. Manage Permissions below in the admin menu takes you to a list of all projects at your institution, and this is also known as the admin primary project list. If you are the institutional administrator, you may see some projects here for which you do not have cataloging access. And if I scroll down at all of the projects at my institution, I see most of them say catalog and manage, but one of them here says manage only. This means that I can't see the content of that project because it was created by someone else and I have not been added as a user on that project. If I click on that project, I can add myself as a user, so I would have cataloging access if I needed it. So this might be useful if you are from an institution with a lot of different users and projects and you need to keep track of all of them. So also under admin is customize landing page. You have access to this in Forum, of course, but I just wanted to point it out because if you haven't already customized your institutional landing page, you really should. This is important because this is where you customize your institution's JSTOR page that everyone sees when they look at your institutional collections. And you can use your own institutional branding here. So you upload your own institutional logo, you can upload your own banner image, change the color scheme, and also add a brief description of an institutional level description for your collections. And as a reminder, this is the institutional landing page. If you need to set up your collection level landing page, that option is still found under project settings, just like it is in Forum. The last option under admin is statistics. This takes you to a page about your content storage, audio, video, and preservation allowances. We'll talk a little more about audio, video, and preservation in a few minutes, but I wanted to show you that this is where you can see how many minutes you have used of your allowance with details about audio and video. And below that is information about how much of your preservation allowance you have used. If I scroll down to the very bottom, there is a link to collections usage data. This shows you usage information about your published items, what you may already know as the collections usage dashboard. And note that this is a demo account that I'm using where we don't publish anything publicly, so there will be no usage displaying. But hopefully when you log into your own usage dashboard, you'll see some interesting information about where the content you publish to JSTOR is being used. Okay, so let's go back to stewardship and look at the next section, which is called cataloging tools. The first option here is build collections, which is where you can build collections starting with a spreadsheet of metadata using the collection builder tool you may already be familiar with from Forum. You can also access and manage any controlled lists you already have here under Manage Lists. And then the last option here is create name, which takes you directly to the name form if you need to add a new name for your users to access while cataloging. You can also continue to create names from within the cataloging interface just as you can in Forum. The support link at the bottom takes you to the stewardship support site with links to different categories of relevant articles. You can also always get to the support site by clicking the question mark that appears at the top of every page in stewardship. So that is the sidebar, and as I said, this is persistent throughout most of the platforms. You can always easily get to these tools that you need. All right, so next we're going to take a look at some updates when viewing records in your project. So I'm going to go back to the projects view, and I will open this first project called Nature. All right, so when I open a project, I see a couple of things that look different from how they appear in Forum. So I'm going to first collapse this sidebar so you can see more on my screen. At the top of the page, there are a couple of tabs now. The first one is called Metadata Records, which of course are the records in my project. And then the new tab here is for the Activity Monitor. The activity monitor, you may recall in Forum, is at the bottom right corner of the screen. And we moved it up here to make it easier for you to access the information about your recent publishing, propagation, and uploads for each project. I'm going to go back to the Metadata Records tab. And when I select any items for this view and need to perform an action on them, I can find these actions using the three-dot overflow menu in the actions bar. This is where I can publish, suppress, or delete items after selecting them. And I can also download the metadata or media files from the selected records. You can also see the option of adding the selected records to a set. So let's move on to talk about sets now. If you are used to using sets and filters in Forum, their locations are now a little different. There's this expandable sets panel to the left of your records where you can view and edit your existing sets or create new sets. I would like to add this video of a jellyfish to my set that I already have called animals. So I selected the jellyfish video and I'm choosing add to set, selecting the animals set and adding it there. Okay. So if I go back to see all of my items, we can talk about filters. Filters are dynamic, as you probably are familiar with in Forum now, and they are now found in the actions bar above your records. You will see the filter button right here. When you select this button, you open the filters menu to narrow down your records by any of your project's fields, including the administrative fields like filtering records updated by a particular user. Once you save filters, they appear at the top of the filters sidebar. So here are a couple that I've saved recently. So when searching within your project or when using filters, you can use Boolean operators and wildcards. So just as an example, I'm going to create a new filter where I search for records with the word frog in the title, but I want to catch records that might say frogs as well. So I'll add an asterisk here and I will click apply filters. This brought me back 4 results. And I can save this filter if I want as title. I already saved this earlier, you can see, but if I want to call this title contains frog, and save it, it will now appear in my save filter. So if I have any records in the future that meet these criteria, they will be automatically updated to this filter. Okay, let's go back to the view of our project. And I'm going to open up an item record. I'll open up this image of a green heron. So when viewing an item, note the tabs beneath the file name. This project has 2 cataloging forms, and similarly to Forum, you can see the cataloging forms right here. This one has one called All Fields and another cataloging form called Minimum, and I can view the fields by clicking on the names. There is also an additional tab now for related objects, which you will only see if you're looking at a compound object like this one is. And we're going to come back and talk about compound objects in a few minutes, but first let's look at the cataloging screen again. So here is a great feature that I think could be really helpful with cataloging. If I need to adjust the size of the media window or my metadata fields, I can just grab and drag this bar in the middle to make the image larger. And then this might be helpful if I need to zoom in while cataloging. If there's like a particular detail I'm looking at that I want to see, I can zoom in and out however I like. You'll also notice, let me drag this back over. You'll also notice some new buttons that are appearing next to some of my metadata fields. These indicate linked authorities and controlled lists that are available within my records. For example, at the top here is a button that says Add Terms under Resource Type. This button appears when you have a controlled list attached to a field. And I'm pointing this one out in particular, the resource type field, because it is a field you always want to populate. This determines where your records will appear in a JSTOR search result, especially when JSTOR users choose to search only for images. So this one has already been cataloged as a photograph for resource type. And once you've cataloged a list term, you will see it here beneath the field name, just like this one is. If I scroll down a little further, I see these buttons that say add links next to work type, creation site, and contributor. These are replacing the icons that currently look like books in forum within your metadata fields where you have linked authorities. So just for example, work type is linked to the AAT resource. Once records are linked, you will see that authority record beneath the metadata field, just like it appears in forum. So I'm going to close this record and take a look at a record with an audio or video file. So I'll open that first file, which is a video of a jellyfish. So as you probably already know, new to stewardship users is audio and video capability is now available for stewardship participants without any additional fees. And when you look at an audio or video file, you will see an additional tab called transcript, like this one. This is where you can see a transcript that is automatically generated for audio and video files that you upload. Excuse me. There may be cases where you'd like to make changes to the transcript. And to do this, I would just download the transcript clicking this button. This will download a VTT file. I can then make changes to the file and then upload the new version using the edit transcript button here. When the record is published to JSTOR, these timestamps will actually be links, so users can jump to different sections within the media file. So that might be helpful for a much longer video than this one is, but just as an example, each timestamp will serve as a link. So I'm going to close this and open a different record. Okay, let me open one of these photos I have of butterflies. All right, so you might be familiar with the functionality that in Forum is called master records, where you can indicate a well-cataloged record as a source to be copied and pasted into other similar records. This has been renamed to main records, and the main record options can be found in the drop-down menu, which appears here next to the file name. The functionality otherwise is the same. This menu is also where you can now find the option for searching for similar images using Google, which opens a separate tab in your browser. This can be handy for helping identify the content you are cataloging, but of course results may vary depending on what Google returns. Let's go back to stewardship. And now we'll look at some updates to compound objects. So we'll go back to that image of the heron right here. So like I showed a moment ago, when viewing a compound object, you can find all images associated with the record under the Related Objects tab beneath the file name. To replace any of these, you would just add the new file first, then delete the old file. And a new feature here for compound objects, which I think is a great time saver, is reordering the files is now through drag and drop. You don't have to enter a number anymore to indicate the order of the files. You can just drag them in the correct order. If I go back to the cataloging screen, I can of course also see the related images larger in the image viewer window by clicking the forward and back arrows there. As Jason mentioned, preservation is also now available for all participants. And I will just take a quick moment to show you how to enable preservation. So to preserve your project with Portico, you go to Project Settings. I'll click on that, and then go to the Preservation tab. And then all you have to do within the project here is choose Start Preservation. This will initiate sending your project information to Portico. Once you set a project to be preserved, Portico will check your project on a monthly basis for updates, so those changes can be reflected in the preserved data. We do have a lot more information about preservation on the stewardship support site if you'd like to see more details about that. So now I'm going to go back to the slides to talk about some educational resources. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the training and support resources that we are making available for you. You may have already noticed that the support site has been updated with information about stewardship. If you do need continued access to forum support articles until the transition, those are now available on the stewardship support site as PDFs. Also on the support site is a transition guide article called A Guide to JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services for Forum Participants. This is a document we are continuously updating with everything you will need to know about your transition to stewardship, including screenshots of what's changed and important dates to keep track of. Dana is going to put a link to this in the chat for you right now so you have it on hand. I also wanted to note that we have created updated versions of all of the forum video tutorials for the same workflows in stewardship, and these are available now on YouTube as well as on the support site. We are continuing to add to these over time, and if you'd like to see them, Dana is putting a link to the playlist in the chat right now as well. Along with the forum transition to stewardship, we will be offering ongoing monthly training webinars that will cover all aspects of using the features in stewardship. So you will have the opportunity to participate in regular live training and get your questions answered once the transition takes place. So those monthly training webinars will start once all forum participants have transitioned to using stewardship. Finally, oh, you know what, Dana? I think that the second link you posted was not for the video, so I can go ahead and post that right now. So if anyone wants to see the list of all of the video tutorials, I just put that in the chat right now. All right, so finally, as forum users, you may already be familiar with the forum participant discussion list, which is currently called JF Discuss. We are continuing to use this list as a means of reaching out to our participants with announcements, monthly tips, and more. If you would like to join this discussion list, Dana has already just put that information about how to join JF Discuss in the chat. So just send an email to that email address and we'll add you to the Discuss list. Okay. We are all going to come on camera now to see what questions have come in. So if you'd like, please feel free to use the questions box now in your go-to panel. Dana has been keeping track of questions that have been coming in and will take us through them. And I also wanted to mention, if you have a question that is very specific to your own institution, we will respond to you separately about that question. But if you have anything you'd like to enter in the chat now, we do have a good amount of time for answering some questions.
Elizabeth, I wonder if you could take this first one. The edit transcript button, is that for uploading a revised transcript? Download transcript is actually the first button we should use in order to generate an editable file. This seems confusing. So can you clarify the edit and download transcript buttons?
Yes, if you click download transcript from within, I can go back into the project. If you download the transcript, you'll be downloading the automatically generated transcript that's there. And if you want to use that as a document that you can edit and re-upload, you would go into edit transcript to upload the replacement. Maybe it would make sense if these buttons were in the reversed order, but um, if that's the workflow that you're going to use. And does that sound accurate? Did I represent that accurately? Okay.
And then also, Anne, can you clarify? We did mention, we did answer this to the person who asked it, but just for everybody to understand the timeline correctly, would you ever launch it in December, January, for example?
Yeah, the most important, I think the two most important pieces to call out here are number one, that we're definitely going to be letting participants guide us to make sure that we've got things working as needed for folks before we do that transition. And we also, as Jason mentioned, do not plan to do that or commit to not doing that during a semester. So it could be as soon as December, January. But again, we want to keep working with our testers and with participants to ensure that we're really providing the functionality that's needed for you all to continue with your workflows that you're used to.
Great, thank you. I want to also address. I'm going to click that one. This question is there a plan to allow nested projects more than one layer down?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one too. So that is a functionality that we've heard from a lot of folks, and so I definitely know that that's something that that would be very much needed and appreciated. At this point in time, we don't have any near-term plans to work on that, just because we're really focused on getting all the work to enable the transition done first. And as we get closer to getting that transition work completed, we're going to take a look, taking our cue from you all in the community about how we should prioritize the next set of things. And that's one of the things that's definitely on the list of what we want to look at to consider prioritizing next.
Also, a question about sets. Can you explain more about what a set is and if it is related to, in any way, to containers and compilations?
I'm happy to speak to that one. So our support page actually has a great definition of sets and filters that I'll share in the chat after I respond to this question. But a set is within a project, a manual grouping of items. So think of a set as a folder into which you can add or remove items. You can use a set to quickly view items that you need to apply cataloging changes to, view publishing status of, or load new media for, or any other action that can be performed on an item. I think the key differentiator between a set and a container or compilation is that sets are really for managing content or working with your content on the back end in the digital asset management environment, whereas containers and compilations are about how you're presenting that content, how you're sharing it for access on the JSTOR platform.
So Jason, would containers, is there any change in the way containers are going to be accessed and managed?
Maybe I defer to Elizabeth or Anne to speak to the management of containers.
Anne can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, we are not currently changing the functionality of containers, at least at this point in stewardship development. And my apologies for not going very much in depth into sets and filters. That's functionality that is not changed from Forum except for the location of the menus. So I didn't give much of an explanation there, but the functionality is the same as it is in Forum now.
Okay. I have a bulk edit question, and I'm not sure which one of you wants to take that. Will bulk edit function look more like it currently does, with privilege being on metadata versus a pop out? Also, what determines the order of metadata fields in bulk edit? I think we have a video on that, don't we, Elizabeth?
We don't have a video yet about bulk editing, unless I'm not remembering, but that's a good idea. But maybe Anne can talk a little bit more about bulk editing because she's more of the expert here.
Yeah, long story short, bulk editing will be very, very close to the current experience. this is one of those instances where, based on user feedback, we tried something, it sounded like it wasn't the right thing, and so we're going to something that we got feedback on that is really hopefully going to work much better. And again, as that's getting worked on, that's being rolled out to testers to confirm that's going to be workable for everybody and acceptable for everyone. So in terms of the order of the field, we're not changing in any way. So I don't know, Elizabeth, Jason, I can't remember exactly how it's currently ordered, but that's not it. We're not changing anything to the way that currently happens.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I can't think of a change that we've made to field ordering at this point.
Thank you. All right, let me just pull up. They're coming fast and furious here. If we do upgrade to tier 2 or tier 3, will our fees change at all in 2027?
I can speak to that since I spoke to the transition timeline. So all forum, as we've participated, or as you know, it is becoming tier 2 of stewardship services. So at minimum, that is the automatic transition. All forum participants will go to tier 2. Now, of course, if you want to talk about the other tiers 3 or 1, we're happy to have that conversation with you individually and talk about what that transition would mean. In terms of fees beyond 2026, we are working on that right now. As a not-for-profit organization, we're committed to developing fees with the community that can sustain the work that we do, and also continue to meet your needs. So we hope to have more information that we can share about fees beyond 2026 soon, but we also want to take the time to get your feedback, to talk with you as we do that work, and make sure that we arrive at a solution that works for everybody, or as many people as possible.
Also, I wanted to jump in here because I see a question about something I said about the monthly webinars that will start once everyone transitions to stewardship. What I meant is that everyone will transition at the same time. So the monthly webinars will happen beginning that month when the transition happens for all forum participants. I didn't mean to imply that some people would transition over time. So yes, everyone will be able to start training immediately once the transition happens.
Now we do have a question from a pilot user. It says, can you please talk a little bit about allowances? As pilot users, allowances were never an issue, but now will be for both Portico and AV materials, as we have migrated our collection to Forum.
I'm happy to take a shot at that. Others feel free to jump in. So in Forum, there was one allowance, although we didn't call it that within the interface, but it was the 5 terabytes of storage that you had within Forum. That allowance remains the same in tier 2. In addition, you'll have an allowance for the content that you're preserving in Portico, and an allowance for the number of hours of audio and video that are uploaded in the course of a year. The default allowance for audio and video is 250 hours per year. So you can upload each year up to 250 hours of audio video content, have the transcripts created for that. As Elizabeth was showing, when those transcripts are created, you can download from the system, and those are yours. So you can take them and use them elsewhere. There's the statistics dashboard within the stewardship interface where you can track kind of progression across all of those allowances. So we've introduced, with the new functionality, some extra kind of allowances and improved the ability to track and see your progress towards those allowances within the interface. I hope that answers your question. If not, please say so in the chat and we can elaborate.
Okay, let's move on to the next one as we wait to make sure we've done that one. Will all the current lists that I have loaded into Forum automatically appear in the new interface? Will adding new items to master list function in the same way? I think that's an Elizabeth question.
Sorry, I was testing something else behind the scenes for a different question. Um, lists are remaining, so there's no work. If I gathered the question content correctly, there's nothing you have to do on your end with your lists. They will still be there, just like they are in Forum in the new interface. There's no change, and I might have missed the second part of the question. If you want to repeat any of that, Dana, I'm looking for it right now.
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Okay, great. Do we want to talk a little bit about preservation? I see a couple of questions here about Portico and preservation details. Maybe Jason and Roger can jump in here about those questions. There's one about Portico as a preservation service, and the difference between that and the JSTOR, whether JSTOR automatically backs up collections, and what preservation means.
I can take a first pass at that. Roger, or anyone else, please feel free to add. So Portico, just for those of you who might not be familiar with Portico or might not be familiar with it in the context of preserving your digital collections, Portico it's a service of Ithaca that was founded about 2 decades ago and has focused primarily on providing long-term managed dark preservation of published content. So for years, their focus has been providing that preservation for ebooks and e-journals and materials like that. And it really is kind of the gold standard for long-term managed preservation. What is now available through the preservation option in the Stewardship Services interface is the ability to utilize that same preservation infrastructure and technology and approach that Portico has developed over the years, and use it to provide that same long-term managed preservation approach for your own digital collections. So what that means on a practical level is that when you indicate a project for preservation in Portico, that content, both the media and the metadata, will be pulled from the digital asset management system, from stewardship, and ingested into Portico. Once in Portico, they will run the kind of long-term managed preservation practices that you would expect. So that includes things like running fixity checks, running checksums. Content is stored on multiple geographically dispersed servers. So if something happens in one part of the world, or if a file on one server becomes corrupted, it can be repaired from other files. And it provides that management or that preservation for as long as you participate in the services. So the way you can kind of think about the difference between the backup that is offered currently today through Forum, or through just the digital asset management system, that's providing your files are stored in the cloud. So that's good for quick access, for short-term storage, as a place to kind of store your files. Whereas what Portico is providing is a long-term solution to ensure the preservation of your materials for not just the next couple of years to come, but for generations to come.
Thank you, Jason. I have another question that I want to bring up. Here it is. I'm aware JSTOR is developing an AI-based descriptive tool. Will materials we load into this be used to train that tool?
I'm happy to take that one, and then I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that. I'm guessing that that's referring to SQLite, the content processing tool, the AI supported content processing tool that's part of Tier 3. So unless you, so with Tier 2, that functionality is not included, but we're happy to chat further about it if it's of interest. But long story short, at this time, whatever's run through SQLite will not be used to train models, right? So it won't be used to train, for example, OpenAI, which is what we're using right now. They will not be keeping that data. They won't be training on it. We have had questions about whether or not in future we might be able to, for example, have our own model that trains on your data for your content. That's something we've heard from a few people. That's something that we'd be interested in exploring at some point. But yeah, short answer is no, nothing will be training on your material. They won't be keeping it. They would be processing it and deleting it. So, but I don't know, Jason, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you got it. The only thing I would just make super clear is that none of your content is being trained on. If you're participating in Tier 2 and using the digital asset management system to manage your content, it's not the AI tool JSTOR SQLite is not touching your content, and it's not being used for any purposes related to AI.
We have just 4 more minutes. So we're having a couple follow-ups to allowances. When is that going to start? And then follow up on the new allowances. Does that pertain to items uploaded to JSTOR Forum or JSTOR? And that I'm a little confused. So maybe someone can clarify. I'm sure you get this question.
I can take a shot. So the tracking of allowances begins when your access to the new stewardship platform begins. And the hours that we're talking about are hours uploaded. It does not matter how much your content is used. So if you upload 100 hours worth of podcasts, that would count as 100 hours towards that allowance.
So then the question, will audio and video files be priced by file size like other media on JSTOR? It sounds like you're talking about hours.
We are talking about hours. The 250-hour allowance is what is built into your existing fees. We're working right now to determine, we don't yet have anyone who has needed to add additional audio video beyond